Hi.
Hello! Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on what part of the world you are watching our little stream from. Welcome to another Walk on the Geek Side, where we're going into Faenor, the burning of the ships, and the like today. And finally, I got caught up with my homework, so I just won't be Vanna White looking for pictures.
As long as you're doing the correct postures at the same time, I think we're good.
Okay, I am here with Skep
Hey, everybody.
and the lovable Fade.
Hello.
So, I think the last time we left off, we were talking about Faenor and how prideful he was, and how he was talked into being rebellious, for lack of a better way of putting it.
True. Mostly, I think we left off last time with just after the prophecy of Mandos, or the doom of Mandos. But before we go on to the narrative, there was something last time I kind of forgot that I want to touch on this time, just because it kind of shows, like I said, we are talking Faenor down quite a bit. It should be remembered just how good and important, not good in the moral sense, but, powerful and skilled and important he was. But this has always been, it's one of Tolkien's later writings, and it's a very good example of just how petty he could be and where his, how to put it, egotism could lead him from time to time. Skep, you will know what I'm talking about, I'm sure, if I mention the shibboleth of Faenor. Apparently not.
I had to unmute myself. Sorry, I have the mute button on my mic.
That seems logical.
The shibboleth of Faenor. I actually don't know that by that name.
That. Well, here is a fun thing. It's
there's a lot of things I don't know.
It's a bit drier than most. So to our beloved audience, I will kind of apologize for right now, but the Shibboleth of Faenor is one of Tolkien's later writings. It was actually published in the very last part of the history of Middle-earth because it was one of the very last things Tolkien worked on. But it's basically a literary narrative about the change in the Noldor language of pronouncing the letter that we would today call S from the old Thorn letter. Now, the English TH...
I do know what you're talking about. I remember.
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay, all right. I do remember. Yes.
The word sound in English is actually also extant in a lot of other Germanic languages, and it comes from this. This is what the letter was called Thorn, and that's how it's pronounced. Whether it's pronounced or whatever, more sibilant or not, that's basically the point. And in the early days, when Faenor was the only son, so to speak, Noldorim was pronounced with th. However, due to Vanya influences from Finri's second wife, these Noldorin Thorn eventually developed into a pronounced S. And what this whole thing is about is basically it's a narrative of Faenor having a hissy fit because this is happening. He is considering it basically a kind of etymological conspiracy against him.
A bastardization of the language, basically.
Yeah, it's basically like the changing of the pronunciation, not even the letter itself. In the Noldorin alphabet, it remained a thorn. But S also usually exists, by the way, along with the thorn.
Well,
but
it's represented as a corruption. Is that not? Would that be too strong to say?
No, not really. Not really. But I just like I said, it's not going to be a long discussion. It's just an exemplifying Feanor's character. a general linguistic shift, which is hardly unusual, especially amongst the elves who like to invent and modify things, even languages. Faenor took the change from the Noldorim th to the more Vanya-inspired z as a personal insult and conspiracy against him, and forbade anyone who claimed loyalty to him and his personal house from ever using it.
I thought it was. Is it like an S or a Z? Because I thought it was like an S.
It's nothing. It's a separate letter. It's an individual.
I realize that. I'm talking about the pronunciation.
Oh, like I said, it can be. I mean, the. If you take the word the, that would probably originally have been a thorn.
Right. I agree with you. I'm talking about what the destination pronunciation.
The what?
The final form of the pronunciation.
Yes, exactly. It's a kind of a, what is it called? A phonological change.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And
linguistic drift is the one people would probably most recognize.
Right. I was actually thinking of linguistic drift. That's what led me to the word corruption.
Yeah.
And so
again,
at any rate, you're that's great of you to call this out and to explain what it was and how it worked. And I would like to just make a comment, if you don't mind, about what this does. This is a chapter. You're right. It is one of the later writings. It's actually in Christopher Tolkien's. It's in one of his things. I forget which one it's in.
It's in History of Middle-earth, and it's in book 12. Volume 12.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I knew it was in History of Middle-earth. I didn't know which volume it was. And what this does is it shows the richness of this world. This is the sort of thing that makes that world come alive for me.
Yep,
this level of detail, I just sink my teeth into it. There's so much in there. Excuse me for not remembering that it's called the Shibboleth of Faenor right off the top of my.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
I hadn't been thinking about it, but remembering back to when I discovered that, I just sat there reading it, mesmerized, thinking, God, this feels more real to me than the history of the Ottoman Empire.
Exactly. Exactly.
So anyway, I just want, and it's because of stuff like that. So that's the comment I wanted to make.
No, that's also a reason. That was actually how I was going to end up. I mean, like I said, it's a very good example of Feanor's. How someone as magnificent and glorious as Faenor could be petty like a 5-year-old. Which was, of course, the fatal flaw that was his pride. And his pettiness was, of course, the fatal flaws that eventually led him into, basically familiar genocide, or whatever you want to call the kinslaying. But again, like you said, that was where
a huge misunderstanding.
Yeah. It's also an example of just. So we keep saying that Tolkien could do something that I practically see no other author do. And it's exactly stuff like this to make the world feel real. Because you read the Shibboleth, and it's so boring. It's language history of linguistic drift of a single letter from z to z. That's what it is, and it's about 10, 12 pages of Tolkien at his most linguistically pedantic. There you can see how amazing a professor in linguistics he was, but also how incredibly boring I am sure his lectures could be from time to time if you wasn't as
fascinated.
Passionately fascinated by it as he is. But at the same time, because it's basically a lecture he could have held about the linguistic drift of the Thorn to S in real-world languages, it makes the Legendarium seem incredibly real. Even if it also makes Feanor seem very, very petty.
very,
Well,
very,
he
very
was
petty.
very, very petty.
You know, it's funny. I have to share with you. I was having a conversation with a fellow Tolkienista about that, and I was describing, my view of the kinslaying. Guy goes up to the Tolarian. Hey, we need some ships. We're thinking about going over here. Well, what do the Valar think about that? Yeah, they're kind of meh. I'm doubting that kind of, and no, we're not going to give you the ships. We're not going to help you at all. In fact, we're going to start throwing you in the harbor if you.
Yup.
There's so much richness. There's so much amazing storytelling, and then you get into a level of detail like this. There's just a smile on my face every time I think about this world.
I mean, if you look at that and you listen to Faenor and his reticence or outright stubbornness about that particular letter, it's kind of like what's going on now with those of us that keep cringing whenever a certain set of people put an X at the end of Latino.
Latinx.
Latinx. I will never not pronounce it Latinx.
Right?
Same.
Because every time I say it's like my friend the Batman on Twitter and everything. Every time that word comes up and people pronounce it Latinx, he goes, "Isn't that a new window cleaner?" I'm like,
Yep.
"Oh, I really wish it was."
Anyway, like I said, it was just a minor thing that I really wanted to mention last time. But it got away from me 3 weeks ago or whenever it was we were doing this last. Yeah, the Shibboleth of Faenor is one of those documents that people who only care about the story for its pure fantasy wouldn't give a crap about and would probably be bored to sleep by. But for those of us who actually care about world building and lore fluff, it is maybe the single most important piece of documentation of languages outside the various outside maybe his writings on Adunaic and the appendices.
Yeah.
Just like the difference between watching Star Trek because you like it and complaining about how they bastardized the Klingon language.
Yeah, to a certain degree.
I've got to tell you that things like Star Trek and Star Wars, for that matter, that lore feels like thin gruel after I've been in the Tolkien world for a while.
Oh yeah.
Anyway.
And I'm a David Eddings fan, which is what I call B+ grade world building by the standards of fiction. He did a fantastic job for the Malorian and Bulgarian.
He did an amazing job, especially if you can put your hands on the Revan Codex.
I've almost memorized the Revan Codex. I mean, I'm into that. I have 2 copies. That's I wore a copy of the Revan Codex out. I can recite the Proverbs of Nidra, for God's sake.
I will say that the difference between Tolkien and Eddings, which, like I said, B+ to A+ is probably a fairly decent decent grading of it. The difference between Tolkien and Eddings is that Tolkien created a world and put stories into it. Yes. Eddings wanted to write a story and had to design a world around it.
Right. But he wisely designed a lot of that world, a lot of it, not by his own admission, not enough of it, but a lot of it before
absolutely.
The
like
second
I said,
Pentateuch was written.
Not a bad word about David Eddings and his world building. I have a few bad words about David Eddings, but the world building is definitely not one of them. Like I said, he's one of the few that I would mention at least in the same sentence as Tolkien, if not in the same level.
But yeah, in fact, with regard to Eddings, I have more quibbles with his narrative style than I do with his world building.
Yeah, I have some quibbles about his narrative style, but it was what he went for. I also have some quibbles about his maybe because his wife wrote a lot of it, but I have some quibbles about his romantic his ideas of romantic relationships, etc. But anyway, that is for a later date when we get Maddie into reading Eddings at one point.
That won't be hard. I will deliver a full set of the Malorian and the Belgariad just to get her off the dime.
But let's perhaps stick to Lord of the Rings for the present.
I'm so sorry.
No. I'm good with that. I'm just saying, taking on both worlds at the same time might be beyond even our prodigious abilities.
One world at a time, sweet.
Yeah.
Okay, Maggie.
Anyway, okay. So the remaining Noldor, basically everyone except for the small. Okay, last time we ended where Fingolfin, the last of the sons of Finve, repented after hearing the prophecy of Mandos and taking his people back to receive the pardon of the Valar. How many of the Noldor Fingolfin took back is debatable. Originally, he was, of course, in charge of about a third of the host. Faenor was actually in charge of the smaller part of the Noldor people. The greater majority followed Fingolfin and Fingolfin. But how many Fingolfin would have taken back is very much doubtful. Of course, no one ever says anything about it, because all of his children continues with the main host. So I've always assumed that Fingolfin returned with maybe something like anywhere from a 10th to a 5th of the whole group. Definitely a clear minority. Very clear minority.
That's what I always think is just a minor portion.
Yeah. The rest of them continues to head north in the very bleak coastline outside of the Pelori Mountains. And this is where Faenor again decides to be a rancid bitch, if I may be so. From now on, you won't hear me say good things about Faenor. I think I said this last time, but from the kinslaying and going forward, there is not a lot of good things to say about him. There are some impressive things to say about him, but not any good ones. Because he decides that, you know what? I'm getting impatient, and my brother and his crowd are actually kind of hashing my buzz. So let's go. So he puts all of his people, or all those following loyal to his personal house, aboard the ships and sails away, saying basically, "Ha ha! You can go back and beg the teachers for forgiveness." Nah, 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 nah. I mean, that is in Tolkien would never write it like that, but that is basically the point.
Yeah.
And they sail across the great sea and lands on the shores of Beleriand, where, you know, and then at this point, some of his people are like, I mean, okay, I get it. There was only room for so and so many people. So now you're sailing the fleet back to pick up the rest of our people, right?
Nope.
Fingolfin and our people. Nope. Because as it's so obviously set on the screen, at Lothgar, Faenor instead decides to burn the ships and to very openly say what he said in private, namely, fuck Faenor, fuck Fingolfin, fuck everyone that's with him. They can do whatever the hell they want. I am going to do what I want, and you're going to follow me.
Right.
In some writings, especially some of his later writings, he actually manages to burn his youngest son with the ships because he sleeps aboard them. Which, of course, makes Faenor even more
Crazy.
basically cray.
Right.
But in the published Silmarillion, that is not the case. So whether or not people would believe this to be true or not is up to the individual. Although in the published Silmarillion, both of the two youngest twins appear later in the narrative. So
Yeah,
I suppose
for that reason, I consider that to be.
I assume we have to believe
Apocryphal.
that the burning of Ambarossa to be, or Amras more specifically, to be apocryphal, even though I'm sure Tolkien would have changed the overall narrative to that had he had the time. The burning of Amras was also one of those late writings that he never really got around to do very much with, because he, kind of died.
Kind of died.
Well, that, of course, leaves Fingolfin and his people rather stranded. They are stuck on the death plane, so to speak, between the sea and the Pelori Mountains. They have the vengeance or at least the anger of the Valar behind them, and it's actually mentioned in the narrative that from across the ocean, mind you, this is supposed to be the Atlantic, a much narrower Atlantic, but supposed to be the Atlantic Ocean. They can see the burning of the ships. Admittedly, it's a flat world at the time, and there's not supposed to be any other light sources apart from the stars. The trees have died, after all. I still find it impressive that they are capable of seeing the ships burn, but elves have good vision, I assume. What do your elf eyes see, Fingolfin?
That's just exactly what I was about to say.
I see a frigate on fire. My brother is a bitch.
Yep.
My brother is a bastard.
However, so there is a slight discussion. Do they then return with the tails between their legs, not out of choice, but out of necessity, and beg the Valar for forgiveness? Forgiveness they would probably have had after some penance, or do they think of another solution? And they decide on another solution, because, you see, the two proto-continents that made up the world at this time are joined in the very far north by a place called the Helcarax. The Sea of Grinding Ice.
Can we just all enjoy that word together?
Yes, please. I was going to say that. The Helcarax.
Yeah, I couldn't pronounce that no matter how many times I tried.
My pronunciation is absolutely not correct with the amount of umlauts. I am sure I'm not placing emphasis on the right letters, etc. But it's such a wonderful word.
Yes, it is.
The Sea of Grinding Ice. So it's not the North Pole as such. It's more like, take the worst example of an unstable piece of ice floes with great icebergs breaking up and collapsing and churning up everything around it.
Yeah, think of the last National Geographic special that you saw on television that shows the very uneven, scary crevasse driven ice up at the Arctic, and then multiplied the size of the chunks by 5. Yep. That's the Helcarax. And they're all grinding against each other, unstable and deadly.
Suddenly open up crevices down into the ocean.
Right. The frigid ocean.
And Fingolfin's hosts decide to say, yeah, we're not going to take this. We're going to go there, and we're going to go over that, and we're going to go down, and we're going to give Faenor a small piece of our mind.
Right.
That's right. What could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong? Well, as it turns out, a hell of a lot, but we will leave that for a second. Instead, we will go to Faenor, because he is the interesting one right now. So, yeah, Helcaraxi, probably. But again, it depends on the pronunciation of the vowel sounds, etc.
Yeah.
Anyway, Faenor and his men has landed in Beleriand. As you might or might not remember, the status of Beleriand right now is basically that the Green Elves have retreated into their forest in Thargelion. Morgoth's orcs are besieging the Falathrim harbors of Eklarest and Brithambar without being able to actually break into them, and Thingol and his Grey Elves have retreated within Malian's girdle around Doriath, where no orcs would be capable of following them. So it's basically a bunch of orcs roaming across Beleriand without actually being able to do very much at the presence. This changes rather quickly, because of course Morgoth is quite well aware that Faenor would have landed in Loshgar and started marching inland with his forces. So immediately he gathers all of the forces available to him and sends them out to meet the invading Noldor. And what we're going to have now is the second of the 5 great battles of Beleriand, namely the second battle, the battle under the stars.
Right.
Yep.
The first battle was a sort of stalemate strategic victory for Morgoth. His forces were mostly routed in the actual battles fought, but the numbers of his orcs and whatever else forces he had available to him at the time, wolves, proto-trolls, etc., had managed to force... Yeah?
The battle under the stars, can we say the elven name? It's Dagor Nuin Gileath.
I'm sure we can. I couldn't. That was why I chose not to.
I just some people say Dagor. I say Dagor because there's the following vowel, and I'm American, so
I can handle the next 3, but the Dagor Nuin, the battle under the stars.
Dagor Nuin Gileath. I love the Elvish.
Yeah, they call it the Battle Under the Stars, the second great battle of Beleriand. And Morgoth is gathering the forces he has available to him, and he's facing Feanor's collected armies. And Morgoth isn't there himself, of course, but his armies are suddenly getting spanked. Like I said, last time was a tactical draw, but a strategic victory for Morgoth. This time, his orcs are defeated rather thoroughly. We're talking about the High Elves here, the Noldor, very, very pissed at the orcs' boss, and just, I think it's being described in the Silmarillion. Of course, I don't actually have an English version with me at the time, but it's being described as something like the Noldor still had the light of Valinor in their eyes and spirits, and the orcs could not contest with them. As usual, the forces of evil outnumbers the forces of, I won't say good because it's Faenor, but the forces of the elves rather significantly. But in a 10-day battle, Morgoth's host is basically annihilated. Only smaller forces are left to flee as best they are able. Some of them are driven out in some swamps. Something that, of course, happened very much in real life. So I can excuse it, but that is one of Tolkien's most recognizable narrative. I don't even know what to call it. Narrative devices after a battle that the survivors are being driven into marshlands there to die.
I found that passage describing the Noldor during the battle. If you want,
Please.
The Noldor, outnumbered and taken unawares, were yet swiftly victorious, for the light of Aman was not yet dimmed in their eyes, and they were strong and swift and deadly in anger, and their swords were long and terrible. The orcs fled before them, and they were driven forth from Mithrim. with great slaughter and hunted over the mountains of shadows into the great plain of Ardgalen that lay northward of Northonion.
Yes.
The Noldor pursued them, right?
Noldor pursued them. In fact, the Noldor pursued them so thoroughly that practically none of the orcs escaped. The last tiny remnant of the orc forces desperately fled across Ardgalen towards the Iron Mountains and the gates of Angband, but Faenor himself, with only a very small personal guard, was so outraged that he outpaced his own army following them. Another, by the way, historical and literary device that Tolkien certainly did not invent, but is using here for good measure. Because so far, the Noldor had faced mostly only orcs and, again, probably proto-trolls and wolves, etc. Now, however, Morgoth released his Balrogs and his reserves from Angband itself. And they surrounded Feanor's smaller group and cut down his guards. Faenor, however, like I said, I have very little good to say about him, but I have a heck of a lot of impressive stuff to say about him.
He stood and fought Gothmog sword to sword.
He stood and fought the collective forces of the Balrogs.
Right.
Probably down to all 10 of them, or however many was left at this point. We had that discussion last time. Orcs, trolls, and the collective forces of the Balrogs for hours. That is quite badass, whatever else you might think about it, but eventually Gothmog, the Lord of the Balrogs and Morgoth, great war leader, Morgoth had eventually 3, but in the beginning 2 great lieutenants. He had Sauron, who was his Sauron was his great lieutenant, but Sauron was at this point certainly not a leader of war. He was an enchanter, a necromancer, a wizard, an advisor, more rather.
Yeah, kind of a Gandalf or a Saruman of the evil.
Yeah. Gothmog was the leader of the Balrog, the greatest, I mean, one would assume the greatest Balrog to have ever existed, and Morgoth's primary war leader, and eventually his black axe dealt Faenor a grievous and mortal wound. Yeah, however,
he was the one who killed Faenor, or actually
he was definitely the one who killed
Faenor. Faenor got hustled away, didn't he?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Faenor had managed to hold on for so long that the armies of his sons arrived, and the Balrogs and Morgoth's last forces withdrew into Angband, where the Noldor couldn't breach the gates. So Faenor was saved, except of course he was so mortally injured that he couldn't be healed. There was no time; he would die. So instead, he is helped up onto his shoulders, and looking across Ardgalen towards Angband, he curses Morgoth 3 times, at which point he dies. Now, his spirit, of course, his name means spirit of fire, and his spirit is so fiery that his body literally burns away. I kind of have, the death animation of vampires in Buffy the Vampire Slayer in mind at this point.
Yeah. Blind Press has a question. Are Sauron and the Necromancer spoken of in The Hobbit the same person?
Yes, absolutely. He wasn't originally. Originally, the Necromancer was just some random vague threat that was powerful enough to get Gandalf away from the dwarves and Bilbo, so they could actually be threatened by something for a change.
Yeah, at the time of the writing of The Hobbit, that was true.
Yeah, actually, absolutely. However, even then, Tolkien sort of in his private notes had already kind of... I mean, the point was still that the Hobbit was not meant at the time of writing to be part of the greater legendarium. It was an individual story meant to be basically a bedtime story for his children.
Right.
The whole thing about bedtime story for his children is a bit overrated. Because of course he did start writing it out as an actual book almost immediately.
Yeah,
but
I take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, but it was never meant to be part of the greater legendarium from the start. It was Tolkien, so naturally when he needed a wise elf lord in a hidden fortress that could translate the moon runes on Thorin's map, he picked Elrond. It was never meant to be more than, inside joke for myself kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But yes, the necromancer from The Hobbit is supposed to be Sauron. The second he let's put it like this. When The Hobbit was first published, no, he was just some vague random sorcerer. The second he started writing properly on The Lord of the Rings, he retroactively became Sauron.
It's a little bit of retconning, and it's very unusual for Tolkien.
Yeah.
But he definitely retconned the necromancer. You don't get the name Sauron at all in The Hobbit.
But yeah, he was he was the same. If in the legendarium as we know it, they are the same.
One other important thing: Sauron was not gay. Just want to get that out there.
Well, he might. He might have been pan. We don't know.
I was doing a Dumbledore joke. All right. Anyway.
Yeah, I know. All
right. Moving along.
Anyway, so passes Faenor, the greatest of the Noldor. I mean, leaving everything aside, the fact that he was at the end basically like
he was larger than life.
I hate to make this comparison because it's completely unfair to Faenor, but it's a fairly good comparison to what it is. At the end of his life, he was probably far out there within his own wounded pride and arrogance as Adolf Hitler was at the end of the Second World War. I'm not comparing Faenor to Hitler. I am saying they were as far removed from reality within their own delusions.
Right.
The delusions came from different places, but even that should not remove the fact that Faenor was, without question, the greatest of the Eldar to ever live. And he could have been the greatest single, hero, lord, king, anyone on the Free Peoples had ever known. Could have been.
Yeah, had he not let his pride get the better of him.
Yeah, could have been, but certainly wasn't.
Right.
But I am pretty damn sure that people at this point realizes my opinions on Faenor as a general rule.
Mm-hmm.
However, the forces of the Noldor under the sons of Faenor now, probably under most control of Maedhros, his eldest son, are retrieving to the... can you put up the... Yeah, that's Maedhros. Can you put up the map variant?
Sure. Here we go. Copy.
Okay, they are retreating to Hithlum, more specifically around the Great Lake of Hithrim, which is there somewhere. Can you point to the Great Lake within Hithlum? Up in the yes, right there, in that area there. They are retreating to there, and Morgoth decides, well, we have done well with these people with a subterfuge before, so let's send an embassy to them and say, hey, guys, you want to have peace talks? Because I think we're at a stalemate here. And the sons of Faenor said, sure, we'll do that. Neither of the sides... This is, again, one of those things where you can see the Silmarillion was not written out entirely as a narrative when Tolkien died, because this is one of those where he obviously probably would have added narrative if he had the chance, but I still love it. it basically both sides. Maethras would come as Maethras would come as the representative from the Noldor, and probably Sauron from Morgoth. No one really knows. It's not that his people isn't mentioned, but the text says something in the style of both sides expected the others to cheat, so brought more people than agreed, but Morgoth brought the most, and Maethras was taken captive. And this might just be me, but I find it somehow hilarious that of just how it's written out. Tolkien, the master of prose, master of epic prose, writes something in the style that's basically like that. Both people accepted the others to cheat, but one of them cheated better.
Right.
In this case, Morgoth treated better.
Yeah. All right. Otherwise written as, but the sons of Faenor knew that Morgoth would betray them and would not release Maethras. Whatsoever they might do, and they were constrained also by their oath, and might not for any cause forsake the war against their enemy. Therefore Morgoth took Maethras and hung him from the face of a precipice upon Thangorodrim.
Didn't he bolt him by his wrist or something?
And he was caught to the rock by the wrist of his right hand in a band of steel.
Yes.
So that's that.
Sweet.
Did we lose Sage?
Morgoth was kind of a terrorist.
We lost Sage.
Sage.
We lost Sage.
I swear.
I went to read a narration and we lost Sage.
I swear to Manwë himself, I will get through one of these without locking myself out one day. I swear.
Well, anyway, shortly thereafter, the host of Fingolfin.
Let's get back. Let's get back to that.
By Faenor and abandoned in Aman.
Yeah.
They came to Middle Earth. Go ahead and take it.
Let's get back to that, because now we need to. Until now, we have been following things pretty. It's worth mentioning, by the way, that according to the timeline, from the Noldor landed in Beleriand, with Feanor's Noldor landed in Beleriand, until Maethras was captured, it was something in the style of 5 years. This is the problem, of course, with the timeline. I know the elves had plenty of time because they were immortal, but it still seemed to have taken way too long to fight a battle and then to have this treaty that went wrong. But anyway, Maethras is captured, and yes, because now we're going to a little bit. Yes, Fingolfin and his hosts made it across the Helcaraxi. They lost people. Fingolfin's youngest son, Turgon, actually lost his wife. His wife died, and he only saved his daughter by jumping into the very, very, very frozen waters and swimming out to get her up again. Let's just say that they suffered and they lost a lot of people in the crossing, and when they finally got down into Lamoth, where we remember that Morgoth had battled Ungoliath, it was probably difficult for them to figure out if they were more pissed or at Faenor. However,
flip of a coin at this point.
Before we take that minor confrontation, we're going to go back to Aman, because something rather significant happened in Valinor at the time. Okay, we go back in time until after the judgment of Mandos. Whatever is going on in the outside world is, for the present, forgotten by Valar and the elves. So the Valar are sitting in the circle of doom, which is, again, reminder that doom in the archaic term that Tolkien used, basically meant judgment or destiny or fate. So the circle of doom is not necessarily something negative. It was just where the Valar met to hold council and make decisions.
Right.
And they are sitting there basically in silence because the trees are dead, Morgoth has escaped, the Silmarils have been taken, elves have killed elves, and one of the three kins have done it and left. So they are sitting there. They are sitting in silence, it's described, but I'm sure they are capable of communicating without words. However, someone has an idea. Yavanna, in all probability. So they go and find. I think she's actually. God damn it! It's been too long since I remember this passage. Anyway, I think Nienna cries over the trees because she is Nienna the crier. And anyway, each of the trees gives one last fruit before they go out completely. Of course, one made of silver and one made of gold. Shining with the light of the trees that are also in the Silmarillion, although one would assume without the divine spark that was probably caught within the jewels, as we discussed last time. However, the Valar sees this, and they're getting an idea. Because what if we decide to give light to the entire world instead of just us this time? So they hallow these fruits and place them in separate containers, basically, or separate. It's basically separate spaceships, to be completely honest. It's a fantasy world, but that's basically what it is, because they're setting them in a kind of vessel that can fly through the ether above the surface of Arda and go below it within the bounds of air. And they pick 2 Maya spirits to guide these things. There is Arion, who guides the golden vessel across the sky, and there is Tyrion, who guides the silver one. Now, unfortunately, Tyrion falls in love with Arion, and so pursues her across the night sky, except that Arion is a spirit of fire, probably from the same kind of fire spirits that the Balrogs were corrupted from, and when he gets close to her, he is burned by her flames. However, I am sure every one of you can see where this is going. What we have here is the legendary creation of the sun and the moon.
Yep.
And of course, the Valar sends these across or under the world to the gates of morning in the far east. And as Fingolfin sets foot on Beleriand with his hosts, the moon rises for the first time in the east.
This is some of the most beautiful allusions.
Yes.
In the Legendarium.
I don't think I can do it. This is why I did it without any real epic tailing, because I don't think I can do it credit.
Can't do it justice. Yeah, I
cannot do it justice.
I couldn't either. No, I'm with you.
As much as I would love to, I just can't.
Tears to my eyes, practically. Seriously, very
sentimental. Yeah, Arion and Tyrion. I think his name is Tyrion. Tylion! Sorry, Tylion!
Tyrion, yeah. It's only Tyrion in Japan. Tyrion! Because they can't spell. Just kidding. If Mashisu's listening, just kidding.
Tylion is his name. But anyway, where are we? Overall, Tylion. So the moon rises, and as the host of Fingolfin enters Beleriand. Now, the Fingolfin and his people also enters Hithlum, where the Faenorians is encamped, and because the two sides, realizing that his brother is dead, and realizing that as much as I'm sure he would like to release his hounds of wars upon his nephews, nothing good is going to come of it. So the two settle down in a sort of uneasy truce on the on both sides of the Great Lake, and then, of course, the sun rises. And again, try to imagine this from the elves' perspective. Hell, try to imagine this from Morgoth's perspective. At this point, despite the destruction of his host, I'm sure he's actually feeling pretty damn good about himself. He's killed Faenor. Okay, one of his men has killed Faenor, but Faenor is dead nonetheless. And he is pretty safe in Angband as he sees it, and can start rebuilding his forces.
Orcs come and go.
And orcs definitely come and go, not to mention that if his opponents are divided and might even fight amongst themselves, so much the better. And then the eternal darkness of Middle-earth. Remember, Middle-earth have seen no more light than that of clear starlight since the fall of the Great Lamps, maybe 15,000 years before this.
Well,
30,000 years before this.
They will have seen fire.
Oh, I'm sure they will have seen fire, but there's a big difference, as anyone will attest to, there's a big difference between standing even on a starlit night with a bonfire and then the freaking sunrise.
Right. Well, no doubt about it. I just wanted to get that out there.
That is what we're dealing with here. And remember, this is one of those things, again, where Tolkien imbues so much of his writings with a sense of wonder without even have to write it. We know what the sunrise is. We expect it. It is, in fact, it would in fact be surprising if the sun didn't didn't rise in the morning. Hell, in the Lord of the Rings, the dawnless day is a fairly significant plot point.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
These people have never known this. Never, ever known anything like this. And then, basically, without warning, okay, there is this moon thingy. Don't really know what it is. It's pretty decent, but even the light of the full moon doesn't exactly light up the sky to a degree where you are blinded. And then, out of nowhere, the far sky would turn a sort of weird pinkish blue, and the sun would rise for the first time.
See, this is an interesting thing. There's something I'd like to point out here, and that is that in the Bible we get, "Let there be light, and there was light, and God saw that it was good." That's all the narrative you get. That's all the introduction that the sun gets in the Bible. This is doing the sun justice. This is the sun appears at the crescendo of some of the best narrative writing I've ever read.
Mm-hmm. And of course, Morgoth is described as huddling in the deepest pits of Angband with his forces, being terrified by this thing as the elves spirits are lifted, because they recognize what this is. They don't know what it is, but on a very spiritual level, they will recognize that this is basically the light of the trees somewhat returned.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So it is... it's amazing.
It's of the same stuff.
Yeah. It's of God himself. Right. Not even the Vanya. This is of God himself. Yep. And at the same moment as this, we will go on with the elves. We will take a short bio break in a second, or at least I will.
I will too.
But at the same moment as the elves stare in wonder upon the now lighted world, where I am sure grass and trees immediately begin to grow with photosynthesis, and Morgoth and his orcs are cowering in the lowest pit they can find with closed windows and shutters on in the far eastern realm of Hildorian, men awake. The second of God's children, humans awaken with the first sunlight.
See, reading this for the first time, I'm getting a lot of connections. One was kind of giggly that I mentioned in DMs, but this is one because,
we'll get back to that in a later episode, believe you me.
I play the tabletop, the Middle-earth role-playing game, the tabletop game. And I always wondered, because I had never read the Silmarillion, why is it that the orcs that were created were weak during the daylight? And apparently, I can actually assume now it's because these people read the Silmarillion and go, okay, so they shun the sun, so let's turn this into a weakness if they fight during the day.
Yes. And, of course, it's mentioned in The Lord of the Rings. Mm-hmm. The Uruk-hai, that is the point. The Uruk-hai can do stuff like men out in the sun. The Moria orcs can fight, of course. It's not like they're vampires, but they are basically being hit with the light of God while being complete corrupt.
They have no love. They have no love of the sun.
No.
And whereas the Uruk-hai can... they're massive, they're fully powerful under the sun and can cover great distance at speed.
Yeah.
Just to complete the quote.
Yeah, exactly. So why do the men rise in Hildorian? Well, that's very easy. They do that because Hildorian, they rise where they rise. We don't know where. I mean, we know the elves rose on the shores of Cuivienen. Men doesn't have as much memory as the elves do, if nothing else, because, men live 70 years or 80. Elves, there could presumably still be elves in Valinor who awoke at Cuivienen with the first starlight.
Yeah.
Unlikely, but not impossible.
Yeah.
Actually, very likely, thinking about it, with the resurrection of the elven when they died. But men awoke in Hildorian. Hildorian means land of the followers, or land of the aftercomers, because that's basically the name of men for a while for the elves, the aftercomers, because they were the second children. And with the elven hosts staring in marvel at the sunlight, the first humans opening their eyes to gaze at the world, Morgoth cowering in his pits, and the dwarves probably trying to figure out what this weird light that's filtering down into their caves is. We are going to take a short bio break because I really need to pee.
We both do. The old man.
Be right back.
And the sea.
Okay, while they're doing that, I'm going to set up and read to you the passage that he's talking about. So we're going to go over here, and I've got to find it first. So let me see. Of men. There we go. Of men. Okay, now I have to unshare and reshare because it's the only thing I don't like about this particular app. You got to unshare and then reshare. Wait, okay, so stop screen, share screen, and let me see, application window. All right, so that should be, okay, good. Okay, so here we are, story time. Okay. All right. At the first rising of the sun, the younger children of Iluvatar woke in the land of Hildorian, in the eastward regions of Middle-earth. But the first sun arose in the west, and the opening eyes of men were turned towards it, and their feet as they wandered over the earth for the most part strayed that way. The Atani, they were named by the Eldar, the second people, but they called them also Hildor, the followers, and many other names. Apanor, after the afterborn, Angvar, the sickly, Thirimar, the mortals, and they named them the usurpers, the strangers, and the indiscrutable, the self-cursed, the heavy-handed, the night-fearers, the children of the sun. Of men little is told in these tales, which concern the eldest days before the waxing of mortals and the waning of the elves, save of those fathers of men and the Atanari who, in the first years of the sun and moon, wandered into the earth of old.
Yes. The next sentence is actually important, but I sincerely doubt we are going to discuss that today. We are going to discuss that, and we might get around to it, but I think we'll probably start having that discussion next time, because I really want to continue the narrative until the fourth of the great battles, if at all humanly possible, though I doubt it will be. But at any rate, I think we will start with the discussion of the next sentence there, that to Hildorian came no Valar to guide them. That is going to be relevant. Skep, are you back, by the way?
I don't think he's back from his bio.
Okay, then we will just wait until he gets back before I get on with it. What I will say in the meantime is, why am I Bael or Baran. Why am I holding myself so tightly to the epicness of the sunrise? It's basically a sunrise. It's not even described super poetically. It's just the sense of wonder. Why am I stuck so much of that? Because if I could get one thing out of this podcast, or, well, I suppose stream's not really a podcast, this stream, it was to imbue just one other person with the sense of awe I have reading and wonder I have when reading Tolkien's writings.
Amen,
if I could get even one of our beloved audience to actually read the book, I would consider these many weeks a gigantic success.
Absolutely. I'm with you 100%.
I think that's why I like reading some of the passages here and there, because when you read the passages, you really get the sense of the grandeur of his writing, and it might spark the curiosity to pick up the books. And I will say, I am not an affiliate of any kind of Amazon or Kindle, but if you do have a Kindle and you have access to Kindle Unlimited, the Silmarillion is available for free through the Kindle Unlimited program.
Yep.
So, also there are some wikis that make Tolkien very, very accessible. The one wiki to rule them all is a very, very good resource for Tolkienistas who want quick references on who does what to whom. There's another one, I can't think of the name of it.
Tolkien Gateway.
Tolkien Gateway, thank you. And that's also good. And they sometimes when one has a gap, the other one will have additional information, and they're both very useful. And when you want to, quick remember, wait a minute, was Galadriel descended from Finarfin or Fingolfin? You can quick run back to that and find it out really quick. It's great resources.
It's super good. It's super good.
Like
I said, I usually have the gateway open when we have these things, just to make sure I don't forget various people's relationships to each other and so on.
Mm-hmm. I know that's a dig on me. I'm not done.
No, I get it. One thing I believe we haven't discussed yet with
Finarfin, by the way.
It's Finarfin.
Just in case anybody was wondering.
From her, it was his house with the golden hair, after all.
Absolutely.
One thing we haven't really discussed yet, but that I feel we probably should enter at this point, even if it means we won't get as far as I had hoped for today. Then again, getting less far than I think we were. Just hardly news for the show is. I mentioned them slightly. What are the dwarfs doing at this point? And the thing is, we don't really know. We know that the dwarfs came before man. We know that in the year of the trees, they would have spread out from their original birthplaces. Mm-hmm. See, when you will remember, those who have either read this story or watched that stream, that once they were created by Aule and accepted as a new separate race by Eru, They were placed in pairs in various deep places in the world to be awakened sometimes after the elves. They were basically placed 2 males with 2 females, the 7 fathers of the dwarves, each with his mate, except for the eldest, who was placed alone without a mate. This again sort of kinda puts the problem of how the heck basically 13 dwarves managed to populate half of Middle Earth. But let's give them some, especially since we know dwarves are a very low breed or very slow breeding race. But let's not put too much thought into that and just call it divine intervention, I would assume.
Yeah, that would be more pleasant than the alternative.
Well, the only ones we sort of really know specifically about is, of course, the eldest born, namely Durin, the Deathless. Durin was an interesting dwarf, not just because he was the first of all dwarves and the acknowledged High King of all of dwarfdom, if you will, but also because he lived phenomenally long. Considering when he would awaken and when he died, he will have been probably something like close to 10 to 15 years old. And of course, no dwarf after that got even remotely close to that. Like I said, the most long-lived dwarfs after that was 450, maybe 500 if they were particularly fortunate or unfortunate, as you will have it. But Durin awoke under Mount Gundabad in the far north of the Misty Mountains. Yes, Mount Gundabad is exactly where the orcs of the Misty Mountains later had their capital. It was actually the orc host from Mount Gundabad that fought in the Battle of the 5 Armies. Durin, however, awoke there, which caused immense scribblings on Tolkien's part about whether or not Gundabad was an old dwarf city or a sacred dwarf city, or whether or not they wanted to take it back from the orcs, or whether or not the orcs took it from the dwarves, or what have you. It is a mess of writings, but we know Durin awoke there and continued to walk down along the eastern side of the Misty Mountains before he came to the Dimril Dale, where he looked into the Mirrormere, which Kilet Saddam, I am pretty sure it's called, and there saw a crown of in the still waters. He saw reflected above his head a crown of 7 stars, the crown of Durin. Basically, that's what in the Lord of the Rings. Gimli stops while passing next to the Mirrormere and looks into it, then sighs and goes on. Yeah. What he's looking for is basically the stars of Durin, and obviously he didn't get it. Yep. But the sign of the Mirrormere then makes him sure that this is where he's supposed to live. So he goes into the caverns above the lake and starts pretty much single-handedly delving out what later became the greatest of the dwarf mansions, Khazad-dûm, of course, later known as Moria. Mm-hmm. The point is, the dwarves basically did this. The important dwarf cities that we know about is Nogrod and Belegost, which was in the Blue Mountains at the eastern end of Beleriand, because those dwarves were already before the return of the Noldor in somewhat slight and what's it called when, oh fuck me, my English is failing me. What's it called when something is happening not a lot?
Unusual, rare, uncommon.
Uncommon content or something. Rare is the word. It's not. It's the word. It's a simile to rare. But they were in some contact with the elves of particularly Doriath, but not of any meaningful shape or form. And we're going to leave it there because we don't actually know very much about the dwarves before this point. They will only become important later in the story. But that is what the dwarves have been doing. They have been spreading out and forming various cities. Durin sits in Moria or Casa Doom, but does not in any way come into this particular story. While the dwarves of Belegost and Nogrod has founded their cities and created tentative contact with the already existing Sindar elves of Beleriand, but again, as of yet, has no real part to play. That's why we have been mostly ignoring them. However, the sun has risen. Let's get back to the narrative. And the narrative is that the elves are on both sides of a lake. However, Maedhros have a friend. Maedhros, you will remember, Faenor's eldest son, who came with too few people to the path where he and Morgoth tried to betray each other, and was hung up by his right wrist on a cliffside.
Ow, ow, ow.
Ow, ow, ow. He has a friend. Because his best friend is actually, weirdly enough, considering the feud between their houses, Fingon, the eldest son of Fingolfin.
Now
Fingon,
that would be a cousin, right?
They would be cousins, yes.
Okay.
I mean, it's not unusual that cousins would be best friends. It's somewhat unusual that that anyone from the Faenorian side would be best friends with someone from
the Sundering,
from Fingolfin's doing Sundering. In fact, during the burning of the ships, Maedhros had been arguing with his dad because he wanted the ships to go back and pick up Fingon, who was his best friend. However, Fingon decides, I'm not going to let my bestie just hang out up there, so to speak. I'm going to climb up and rescue him. So he sets out alone, crosses the Ardgalen, the plain in front of Angband, climbs up as far as he can, and actually finds Maedhros. Except he cannot reach him. The cliffside is simply too steep. And Maedhros is basically, okay, you can't do this, just kill me.
Shoot me.
Shoot me, you bastard!
Right. You can't save me, shoot me, end my suffering, basically.
Yeah, so Fingon, with tears in his eyes, draw his bow to shoot him, at which point, and for the first time in the narrative, you will get used to this, I was about to say walking, but we're actually talking about flying Deus Ex Machina.
Right.
Thorondor sweeps in.
What now? Interesting thing happens before the eagle appears. He prays to Manwë.
He does pray to Manwë. This is true.
To speed the arrow along. And I think that's how Thorondor got the word.
Probably.
Hey, let's give this guy a lift. Let's give him a break.
It's also noticeable that even then, so shortly after the rebellion, so shortly after they had left and decided even not to go back when they obviously otherwise had no choice, Fingon prays to Manwë. Mm-hmm. It's clear. This is actually, it's a small point, but it's actually very interesting because it is a point that Tolkien is making right there. Like I said, it's a subtle point, but it is a point making that the Noldor, despite all the shit they, and especially the Feanorians, have done, are not out of... they are not incapable of being redeemed.
Yeah.
They are still basically good people caught in a bad situation and have made bad choices, but they are certainly not irredeemable.
And they have not turned away. They've not turned away from their god.
They have not. They are certainly still the good guys, especially now that Faenor is, dead and gone.
Yeah. To me,
technically dead. Let's get back to this let's save Maedhros first. So anyway, Fingon tries to shoot him, but of course before he shoots him, Thorondor sweeps down. Now, if any of you during the Lord of the Rings have considered the point that the eagles are basically a feathery deus ex machina used by Tolkien whenever he couldn't get his heroes out of a situation otherwise. I have thoughts on that, by the way, but I have mentioned those thoughts a very long time back in the streams we did in the very first couple of streams.
Mhm.
Me and Skep had a couple of very long rants on that. But if you ever thought that Gwaihir the Windlord was a deus ex machina, I would like to introduce you to Thorondor.
Right.
Thorondor was the first great leader of Manwë's great eagles. Gwaihir was actually one of his lieutenants. Thorondor, Gwaihir was one of the great eagles. He could carry Gandalf on his back. Yes. Not for very long, but he could. Thorondor is something like on the average of a proportional size bigger. Mm-hmm. He is freaking huge. He is my opinion on Thorondor is that he's probably a Mayan spirit in bird form.
Oh, yeah. I absolutely.
Gwaihir and the other eagles are natural animals. Fantasy animals. They are bigger, stronger, actually intelligent. But I'm absolutely certain they are natural creatures. The Thorondor, to my mind, is a Mayan spirit that is permanently stuck as an eagle.
All right.
Or have permanently chosen to live as an eagle.
I have a slight... It's not a disagreement, maybe an enhancement or an addition to what you just said.
Please.
I think that the eagles started out being natural, normal, amazing creatures, but that Manwë, when he purposed them for them to become his messengers, enhanced them.
I am perfectly on board with that explanation.
Yeah, completely.
It makes a lot of sense from what we know.
And for those of you out in the live chat, if you're a little bit curious, I did open up one of the fandoms, and it says that the height of these eagles is huge, possibly larger than 100 feet. They're immortal. They speak Westron, Quenya, Sindarin, and Velarin.
Yeah, and Thorondor is bigger than that.
Mm-hmm.
He's a chunky boy.
Yes. He's basically the size of a stadium.
Yeah. He's a chunky boy, as you will also see at the very end of our Silmarillion chat.
He's thick.
He's a thick boy. Let's put it like that.
Thick. Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, he swoops along and then carries Fingon up to Maedhros, except the chain and the handband holding Maedhros is it's hell iron. Let's be fair.
Maedhros says, "You're going to have to kill me anyway.
Yeah.
I'm sorry it didn't work out."
They cannot even chop the chain over.
But they can chop something else.
They can chop something else. So Fingon is like, "You are not dying here. You will stop this now, or you will get spanked when we get back home." No, I am not suggesting a homosexual relationship between the two. The professor would turn over in his grave, and we have before discussed the failing of friendships between men for the purposes of homosexuality development in the last 100 years. Yeah. But nonetheless, Fingon is like, "No, you are not going to fucking die here." So he basically chops his hands off.
Yeah.
Just like, "No, this is not going to happen." Chomp. So he chops his hands off, and Thorondor carries Maedhros and him back to the elven encampments in Hithlum. What Morgoth thinks of all of this is unknown. My best guess is he doesn't even know until a hell of a lot later, because he and his people are still at this early moment cowering for the sun.
Right.
Yeah.
Later, that would be a little bit different, but so be it. Anyway, Maedhros returned and is eventually healed, and is being described as he later wielded his sword with greater skill and anger in his left hand than he ever did in his right.
Right.
He definitely has some of his father's blood. Yeah. But because Fingon did this for the sake of friendship, it actually serves to... It will be wrong to say that it serves to heal the sundering of the Faenorians and the Fingolfin.
It builds a bridge.
It builds a bridge. It starts putting bandages on the wounds.
Exactly.
And And
Right.
in fact, Maedhros, who is by heirs right as the elder son of Faenor, the High King of Noldor, actually gives up the title of High King of the Noldor to Fingolfin and his heirs as thank you for this.
Right.
This is not supremely popular with all of his brothers, but they don't really have anything to say about it at this point.
Yep. Grill and Pirate Pete, any connection to all the hands being cut off in Star Wars movies? We could postulate that, Lucas was probably had read the Silmarillion and the Lord of the Rings and the like, and probably got a little bit of inspiration from it.
To be fair, both of them probably got inspiration from various classical myths and legends.
Mm-hmm.
Chopping hands off is a very popular device. Both on heroes and villains and something else. Having someone's hands chopped off is definitely a thing to do. Anyway, we will now start moving fast. We have spent a lot of time today on the first few years according to the timeline, the first few years after the first sunrise, in my opinion, will probably be the first few weeks after the sunrise, maybe months.
Possibly.
But we will now do a bit of a time skip 50 years ahead. Maddie, can you find the is this the one we would know? Can you find the one that shows the realms of Beleriand?
The color-coded one that I showed you before?
Yeah, that's that. No, the one that shows the entire
Beleriand.
Okay.
Continent.
Yes.
Okay, here we go. Let me do this. Let me do that. Let me do this.
You have some great maps, Maddie.
Yeah.
Really, really, really well done.
This is the one I was looking for. We have skipped about 50 years now, give or take. Actually, precisely 50 years thinking about it. And the elves have created realms of Beleriand. At this point, Fingolfin the High King, is sitting in Hithlum,
Yes.
and Mithrim.
I was thinking of Hithlum and Mithrin as being part of Beleriand, and they're really not.
They are separated by the mountain range,
Right.
but
They're a pretty significant mountain range, actually.
yeah. But there Fingolfin, the High King of Elves, is sitting and guarding the western outlets. This great river you see right in the middle of the map is the Sirion, which is like the Anduin of the Beleriand.
Continental drainage ditch.
Yeah. It separates the continent, if you want to call it a continent, the part of the continent into two, and it plays a significant part in a hell of a lot of stories going forward. Anyway, Fingolfin is sitting in Mithrim and Hithlum and guarding the outskirts, the springs of Sirion, and the passes out with his mountains towards Angfaulith. Remember, Morgoth is basically right above the map right now.
And Angbad.
If you go to where it says Angfaulith or Ardgarlan, I will call it Ardgarlan for now because Angfaulith is a later name, and then go up a centimeter or so extra. Yeah, exactly.
There you are. Perfect.
There we are.
Excellent.
So Fingolfin is sitting here in Hithlum and Mithrim and guarding against Morgoth from there. Fingon is in Dor Lumin, his sub-realm, probably to give him some separate ability to govern, so he's not completely close to his father. And Turgon, the youngest son of Fingolfin, is in Nevrast, with his capital at Vinyamar. Vinyamar is going to be exceedingly important later,
yeah.
But at the present, that's basically it will change soon. But that is Turgon. The other ones directly guarding against Morgoth is in Dorthonion, where the youngest sons of Finarfin, Angrod and Angros, Angrod and Aegnor, is sitting with their forces, holding the wooded highlands of Dorthonion. And over in the east is the sons of Faenor, with Maedhros primarily on the hill of Himring. And then his brothers Maeghlor, Caranthir, Caligorm, and Curufin guarding the various passes south, with Amrod and Amras sitting further down in East Beleriand with their horsemen. Of course, the Green Elves are still hiding in the woods of Thargelion and Osiriand.
Right.
Thingol is still in Menegroth in Doriath. What's it called? Círdan is still in Falas. Brithombar and Eklarist out near the coast, now no longer under siege. And the last remaining, and for a long time one of the most important of the Elf Lords, the oldest son of Fingolfin, Galadriel's oldest brother, Finrod, has decided. Currently, Finrod is actually with his brothers in Dorthonion, but at 50 years after the elves have arrived, Ulmo. You remember Ulmo? He is the sea god that is
Poseidon.
very good friends with the elves. He speaks to Turgon and Finrod in their dreams and say, yeah, things are going well now. They're probably not always going to go well, guys. So you should think about getting secret realms where people cannot necessarily find you. Turgon eventually finds a gigantic volcanic caldera at the outskirts of Dorthonion, where you can only enter either if you are able to fly, or if you find one very weird, dried-out riverbed pass, and there in the middle of a rock, this is how you can tell it's actually a caldera, because it's a great circular range of mountains with a spike of rock sticking out in the middle of it, and on that rock he builds the secret city of Gondolin. And
he thinks
anyone
this would be a great place. I could really hide this thing.
Fuck, it's glorious.
Yeah.
It's amazing. What a great idea.
So he moves his people to Gondolin without actually... this is the fun part. He moves his people to Gondolin without telling anyone.
Yeah.
I am sure he still maintains contact, at least with his dad and brother, but even they don't know where the hell they are. So he took the thing about keeping this secret and safe quite literal.
If you want to keep a secret, don't tell anyone.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, if that is so at that point Nevrast and Vinyamar becomes deserted, and Turgon's people is in Gondolin. Finrod eventually then goes down to where it says Nagothrond, where there is a bunch of natural limestone caves, and digs out Nagothrond, which is his capital. This is basically Menegroth writ small. You will remember Menegroth, Thingol's capital, is the 1,000 Caves.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Underground. I mean, Menegroth is what Thranduil wished he had in the north of Mirkwood.
Mm-hmm.
Take Thranduil's underground realm in Mirkwood and, multiply it by 1,000,000. And you get just the glory and the strength of Menegroth. Nagothrond is sort of like the middle thing between those two. Nagothrond is more built like a fortress than Menegroth, though it's smaller and more devoted to, defense. But overall, that is what it is. This is actually something I've always found interesting. Again, just what Tolkien does with his elves.
Mm-hmm.
Fingolfin and his men basically became Highlanders. The sons of Faenor basically becomes horse archers, and then half of his kingdoms are underground in river caverns.
Yeah.
And these are all high elves. This is not something you would see in a lot of other usage of elves later.
Yeah.
So that is the ordering of the realms of the Noldor about 50 or 60 years after they arrived and Faenor died. There was a great party some years before that where all of them met and had a great time to spend even more time trying to sort of heal the breaches. Even Thingol sent people to that party, and everything seemed to be going well for a while, until someone let slide to Thingol what the Faenorians had done at Swanhaven. Because I would like to remind you that Thingol's brother, Ulve, is the ruler of Swanhaven. So they basically tried to murderize his little bro.
Yeah.
So after that, Thingol remains cautiously friendly, if not necessarily allied, with Fingolfin's people, but the Faenorians are like, no, you stay the fuck out of this. Do you understand me, people? Yeah. We don't like you anymore. So already here, a lot of the Sundering are being papered over at the time, but again, you can tell where the future breaches are going to be. And the Faenorians and Thingol's people are definitely one of those fracture lines. Mm-hmm. But now we've actually been going on for an hour and a half, so maybe we should stop now before we get really back into the hardcore narrative for this week.
Just one quick thing. When you're talking about Swanhaven, which I have always called Haven of the Swans.
That's probably true. It says Swanhaven in my book. So
okay, is that's the same as Aqua Lande?
Yeah, exactly. That's Alqualonde.
Okay, just in case anybody out there was wondering if
it's where the same thing. It's where the kinslaying took place.
Right.
It's where the kinslaying took place when the Faenorians grabbed the ships.
Yep. And
were any elves but pirates? Presumably.
I think that's him being facetious.
I mean, presumably. All things being what they were.
The other thing was the length of time that it took to build Gondolin.
Yeah.
They built it for like 75 years, right?
Yeah, something like that, from beginning to end, at least.
Yeah, exactly. So
we will get back.
Not an overnight thing.
We will get back to Gondolin later, because of all the realms of Beleriand, the only one that is even remotely as important as Gondolin would probably be Doriath, as you will see later. And Gondolin is in fact, if you read The Hobbit, if you read The Lord of the Rings, when you hear the word Gondolin, that is exactly what we're talking about. Yes. Turgon's hidden city. You have no idea. Okay, I read The Hobbit. I tried to read The Lord of the Rings, but I was just too young at the time. So a couple of years later, I read The Hobbit again. I read The Lord of the Rings. Then I read The Lord of the Rings. Then I reread The Lord of the Rings. And I did that a couple of times, something like 10.
Just like me.
Yeah. Yes. So I was getting quite into this. And then I was like, this is so annoying. It says in the appendix about the First Age, but it's only like 10 lines. And I'm, no, this is bad. Stop it! I want to know more. And then my grandfather, who, by the way, had his 89th birthday just this week, so
happy
birthday, Granddad. My grandfather was like, I was complaining about this one day over there, and he was like, Tolkien wrote this book called The Silmarillion. He didn't know about Christopher back in those days. I didn't know about Christopher and the comparisons there. And the connections there. But he was like, Tolkien wrote this book about the First Age called The Silmarillion. It's right up there on the shelf. And I was like,
eyes glazed over. Suddenly the room seemed very quiet. And
I'm pretty sure I did the whole Homer Simpson, drool minute. Yeah. So I got my hands on the Silmarillion, and A lot of it was cool. Like I said, until I was still too young to truly appreciate all the stuff I'm talking to you guys about now.
Yeah.
But I still loved the whole thing. It was still awesome. And then we got to Turgon's delving of Gondolin. And that was the moment I had my first real literary orgasm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like, wait, no, no. That was the thing with the swords and Gandalf's sword and Sting and Turgon, and it was his and
I'm getting to find out where all that stuff came from.
Yep.
I know exactly the feeling.
I was very close to having a
literary orgasm.
I was very close to doing something very inappropriate with my grandfather's copy of the Silmarillion. Then, let me tell you. Fortunately, on the positive side, I still have that copy on my personal bookshelf because he was kind enough to give it to me. But
some of the pages are stuck together. I had to go there. Okay. Anyway.
All right, next week, same bat time, same bat channel. It's going to be noon Central Standard Time. We're going to be going into yet more of the
glorious battle.
Mm-hmm. The glorious.
That's basically basically the first thing. The glorious battle. As you can imagine, it was a very inglorious battle.
Yeah, battle is never glorious.
Also, if you guys want to follow my two co-hosts, all of their socials as well as other channels that you can find them on are listed below, as well as all the ways to support this channel and all of its content. Now, there is going to be one more stream on this channel, and then the gaming streams are on Twitch. Saturdays at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. Saturday Old Time Radio is back. So if you guys want to join me for that, that is going to be good. Next Wednesday's programming is going to include Sherlock Holmes, Candy Madsen, and I mean the Basil Rathbone, Sherlock Holmes, Candy Madsen, and a couple of other detective stories. So if you guys want to pop into the Discord, I usually allow up to 4 people to co-host so we can heckle them together. But Old Time Radio is making its return.
I heard that as Sherlock Holmes and Candyman, and I was like, that was a fucking crossover I wanted to see.
Yeah, that'd be worth checking out.
Yeah, yesterday we heckled the Blue Beetle, Superman, the Shadow, and a couple of other superheroes. So next Saturday is going to be 4 detective stories. So join us next Saturday. Like I said, if you guys want to be on, co-host with me and help me heckle, let me know. Because right now there are 3 slots open. Well, 4, not including me.
You.
Yeah.
And 4 including you. Yeah, we got that one.
So, yep. See you guys next time, and you guys behave. And if you can't behave, at least be good at it. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.